Good evening and welcome. My name is Raj Safalkar, and I am the Director of Annual Giving here in the Institutional Advancement Office at St. John's. I want to welcome all of you to St. John's. How many of you are students at St. Ben's or St. John's? Okay, a good few. How many of you are community members of St. Ben's and St. John's? And how many of you are community members of the central Minnesota area? Okay, good. So a good diverse group. If this is your first time on campus, we welcome you here. We're thrilled that you've joined us on our beautiful campus. We hope you found the location okay. I'm gonna station myself outside just to send any stragglers in. So thank you for your patience with us. Again, my name is Raj Safalkar, and I'm part of the Institutional Advancement team. And on behalf of Institutional Advancement, I want to tell you a little bit about the Schirber Lecture and the Schirber Endowed Scholarship and Pre-Med Fund at St. John's. This fund was established by Dr. Martin Schirber from the class of 1942 and his wife, Mrs. Rosemarie Schirber, from Grand Rapids, Minnesota. Martin practiced medicine in Grand Rapids most of his medical career, and a number of Martin and Rose's sons and daughters also graduated from St. John's or St. Ben's. The purpose of this endowed fund, which they established in 1980, is to provide support for a scholarship program for students studying pre-medicine at St. John's, and also to provide support for a lecture program, of which there are 2 annually, intended for students in the health sciences, but open to all. And they expressly said open to all. One lecture addresses alcoholism and addiction, and the other addresses pro-life issues in medical ethics. If this is your first time at a Schirber lecture, we graciously welcome you to St. John's for this lecture. And if you'd like to hear more about future lectures of these 2 lectures we put on every year, we have a sign-up sheet on the table on the south side of the room. So if you'd add your name and email address to that sign-up sheet at the end of the lecture, we will notify you of future lectures in this series. So maybe you're here to hear about alcoholism and recovery. Maybe you're here on your own recovery journey. Maybe you're interested in medical ethics, or maybe you're just interested in intellectual topics of conversation. So please do sign up at that sign-up sheet on the side of the room. Also, I wanted to let you know that at the end of the lecture, Dr. Mcdougall, our speaker, will be selling books. So if you're interested in buying a copy of his book entitled Being Sober and Becoming Happy, which is the title of tonight's lecture, Anne from the bookstore is here as well to sell you a copy of his book. And finally, you're welcome to ask questions toward the end of the lecture. Our lecturer will talk for about an hour, and then there will be about 30 minutes for questions and discussion at the end. So please enjoy the lecture. To introduce our speaker, I'd like to invite Steve Schirber of St. Joseph, Minnesota, forward to talk to you a little bit about Dr. John Mcdougall. Please welcome Steve.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Okay. My name's Steve Schirber. I'm an alcoholic, chemically dependent, and I'm number 4 out of 16. My parents had 16 children, and my number 11 sitting here up in the front row with me. And it's an honor to be part of this program. And my parents set it up in the 80s, and I just had a few short stories to tell you about my dad to give you a idea of the character he was. They had 15 kids. I always said that my mom had me and didn't come home till I was in 4th grade, but she doesn't believe that. But anyway, my dad and my parents were really active. They spent like Februarys in Guatemala at a mission, and that was free for all for the month of February. They always did the shortest month of the year, but that was their excuse, and they'd go down there and work as a team of doctors and nurses, and that was our free time, to run wild. But my dad, he came home. In 1966, my mother and father went to Russia and China with a team of doctors and pharmacists, and anyway, when they came home, they brought the 16th child. It was a little gal out of an orphanage in Red China, Hong Kong. And she needed tubes in her ears, and she had a cleft palate, and they agreed to adopt her. And so that's where Oime came around, and she was like, I was 16, and being in the orphanage, it was the only people that ever paid attention to her were my age or older, was sailors, and military people would come in. And so her and I hooked up together really close. We became really tight. If you had to know my dad, he, with 16 kids, lived 2 miles from town. If you were in school after something doing, you needed picked up from school, or you'd mostly run home, but every once in a while you'd catch a ride home with him at 5:30. And one day I got in the car and he says, we can't go right home. I got to stop over at this Kiwanis club. I've got to speak. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, they want to know about my trip to Hong Kong and Russia. And so I said, okay. So, of course, I was trapped. And anyway, I'm sitting through this whole speech. And he's talking and everything. He gets all done. And this big guy sitting in the front row, he goes, any questions? And the guy goes, yeah, Doc, he says, I want to know what the hell's going on here. He says, you got 15 kids, he says, they're running all over the place. And he says, you go halfway across the world and you grab another one and bring her back, and she don't even speak English. My dad looked, he says, none of my kids spoke English when I got them. And that's the type of guy he was. He was just really quick-witted and always, and I always enjoyed, there was a deal with alcoholism, though, and I would just tell a little quick part. My dad sobered up when he was 57. I sobered up when I was 27. And my father, he'd sobered up Christmas Eve of 76, and I sobered up December 5th of 77. And we were close in recovery and stuff, but it came, he was sober about 5 years, and I was up at my shack in the woods, and he told me, you gotta come in, I gotta talk to you, I said, what's going on? He says, I just can't believe it. He says, I've been going to AA for 5 years now, and he says, last week I'm sitting in an AA meeting, and I'm thinking, poor Steve, at least I got to drink 30 years longer than he did. He says, and then son of a gun, I realized, hell, I suffered 30 years longer than he did. He says, that's how bad this disease is. For 5 years, and it took me 5 years to figure it out, that I was suffering those, that I suffered 30 years longer than he had to. So, it's this disease. And I want to introduce John Mcdougall, who I'd like to consider as a friend. I've heard him a number of times, and I'm really impressed with him, and I want to welcome John Mcdougall.
Hi, I'm John. I'm an alcoholic. Turn this on here. It'll work a lot better. Here's the little microphone. 2 positions, on and off. That's on. Hey, it's better. I don't want to stand behind the TV screen. I'll look at the TV screen. There we go. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date's July 4th, 1989. My home group is Summit Hill AA in St. Paul, Minnesota. I have a sponsor. I sponsor others. And this is kind of a mixed lecture, because some people here are alcoholics and addicts in recovery. Some people are alcoholics, addicts who need recovery. Some people are just curious what all this business is about. So I'll have a little bit of information for everybody. So each group already knows some of this, and each group doesn't know some of this. So I'll try to hit everybody with something they can use. I come from a long line of violent drunks. My home is New York City. It's not at all like St. Joseph's. I took the subway to first grade. They gave me a little sack of tokens. If I skipped school, I had to return 2 tokens to ride the subway. So it's very different upbringing. I come from a long line of violent drunks. We were not nice people in my family. Growing up, we were mean, except when we were vicious. So I know all about hatred and nothing about love, because that's what we had. And if I take a quick family inventory, only counting deaths from addiction, not counting illness or injury, including my wife's side of the family, because people, they say opposite attract, but I think like kind attracts in our case. Many years ago, her uncle Alan killed a guy in a bar fight in Palm Beach, Florida, And that was adjusted by applying money and lawyers to the problem. So he was able to plea out to manslaughter and went to a 1-year-long treatment program instead of going to prison. So that treated his legal problem, but it didn't treat his alcohol problem because he never developed the only requirement for AA membership, which is the desire to stop drinking. So once he was out of treatment, he figured he'd been paroled. He resumed social drinking in Palm Beach, where there's plenty of it. Later died of kidney failure, secondary to alcoholism, shortly before he would have died of liver failure anyhow, so that's 2 deaths. And then we have some physicians in the crowd. Her first husband, her starter husband, was a physician, and he was a professor of anatomy at New York University Medical School, a bright lad. He felt he could handle drugs because he understood them. He had a busy schedule, he had trouble sleeping, so he used phenobarbital to get to sleep, a barbiturate. That left him groggy, so he used amphetamines to wake up, actually biphetamines, also known as black beauties. They'll wake you up. But that left him jumpy, so he used phenobarb to take the edge off the amphetamines to give him a boost when he had too much phenobarb, Percodan for aches and pains, liquor to relax, and he gradually shifted from living his life to managing his life with 4 competing chemicals. If we did that as an algebra problem on a blackboard, where the safety line and the effectiveness line intersect is where you die, so he did. He had a series of withdrawal seizures. During one of his seizures, he vomited, breathed in the contents of his stomach, drowned in his own vomit, and expired in a snowbank. But that made me the winner, so this is a very Darwinian disease that made her available. And so we went up north to her parents' summer cottage on Lake Charlevoix, Michigan, to announce our engagement. And after announcing our engagement, I left her home with her parents and went out drinking with her brother. Isn't that what you do when you fall in love with a woman, is promptly leave her and go drinking with her brother? So, alcoholic logic. So we set out on the lake with a group of drunks in a nice mahogany Chris Craft runabout. No lights on the boat. After all, what would you need lights for? It's dark. And I was in the back of the boat minding a very large, very drunk fellow, and her brother Chip was in the front of the boat, a smaller, less drunk fellow. One arm around a drink, one arm around the girlfriend, no arm around the steering wheel, managed to hurl the boat into a high-speed spin in the dark, fell out, and the propeller ran over his head. Oh, he sank, didn't even leave a bubble trail. So the police divers picked him off the bottom of the lake the next day. I had to go to the sheriff's garage and identify the body. Yes, that looks a lot like him. Help with airport transfers, funeral arrangements. Seemed normal to me. Weekend in the country. Welcome to the family. Your son is dead. So that was my introduction to the family. And then on my side of the family, my teenage cousin Billy got arrested selling drugs with a couple friends. And the police questioned him in jail, and he ratted out the other 2 guys and their wholesaler. So they wanted to prove they're loyal to the wholesaler, so they hung him in the jail cell and killed him. And then my little sister developed alcoholism, as did her first husband, and they were initially flower children and worked for the National Park Service and got married in a field of daisies. But as alcoholism developed, they both turned mean, family heritage. And he'd beat her up and break her bones, and she'd smash the beer bottles on the counter and slash them with a broken glass. And they lived in Appalachia with no local police, so the state troopers would come over the mountains and they'd arrest whoever was less injured for domestic violence. But they also brought AA literature, like 20 questions, is AA for you? And here's a meeting list. Why don't you go before you kill each other? And I thought maybe he'd kill her, but she killed him, shot him dead with a rifle. And then called 911 and said, send an ambulance, I just shot my husband. So that attracted the police. So they questioned her during a blackout, and she confessed to the whole thing, so they videotaped the questioning. They typed up the confession. She signed it, still in a blackout. So she wakes up the next morning in jail thinking it's just another fight, but this time there's a body. So the police felt they had a murder case. They got a dead body, an autopsy, a signed confession, videotape questioning, rifle, matching fingerprints on the rifle, bullet. They went forward to a murder trial with that evidence, but it was a small town and a small jury pool, and he had been the town bully as well as the town drunk and had beat up a lot of people. So the jury just found her not guilty of everything because they felt like it. I think they decided it was a public service homicide. They even found her not guilty of unlawful discharge of a firearm within 500 feet of an occupied dwelling, that is in the kitchen. So that proved she didn't have a drinking problem. And they used to drink at the American Legion, and the Legion felt sorry for her because she's a widow, so they gave her a job as a 6:30 a.m. bartender. Well, who do you meet at the Legion bar at 6:30 in the morning? Somebody who needs a drink really urgently. So that's where she met her second husband, and they drank and fought and drank and fought. And the life insurance paid off the house because she wasn't guilty, and they got married, and she took his last name, which is Kill, K-I-L-L. So my little sister's now Mrs. Kill. Thought it was a nice touch. Now, I realized the name Kill is actually Dutch for river. Staten Island, New York is on Kill Van Kull, but it's not the first thing that comes to mind. And several years later, the unfortunate Mr. Kill died of multiple organ failure secondary to alcoholism, so she's available for dating again. So, this is what the milieu that I regard as natural. And my mom was a crazy, mean drunk. My dad was a passive drunk. So all three kids, my older sister, younger sister, and me, all got battered as children, but I got it the worst. And thinking about it, of course I did, because my mom hated her father, whose name was John. She hated her brother, whose name was John. She hated her husband, whose name was John, had one son and named him John. Not a good trend. So at age 5, my mom hit me probably with a pipe, I can't remember, but she fractured my skull, and broken skull pieces cut into the brain and left me with scarring in the brain, which has consequences. The major consequence was I had a severe migraine headache all day, every day, for 64 years in a row, until the summer of 2019, when they invented a really good new migraine drug. It's a monthly injectable, so I've gotten some significant relief in the past year and a half. But 64 years in a row. The next year, when I was 6, she knocked me down, beat me in the face, broke both cheekbones in my nose, and squashed both eyeballs in the socket. So I have persistent problems with vision. The next summer, she knocked me down and stomped my abdomen and crushed all the internal organs, and I was in the hospital all summer with internal bleeding and peritonitis, an infection of the interior abdominal wall. So I spent the summer on a chiller mattress, which is like a kid's pool float filled with antifreeze that they keep really cold to reduce your fever. So I was both hot and cold for the whole summer, shaking with cold and hot at the same time. So summers were really bad in our house because you didn't go to school, you were with her all the time. So my first drink that I remember was age 8 in the family pantry, pouring myself a glass of Old Granddad on the rocks. And my dad came in and patted me on the head, said, "Well, aren't you the little man?" I thought, "I guess I am." He said, "But don't creak, Old Granddad, that's for me. You can have Jack Daniels, that's for guests." I thought, I'm reasonable, I'll compromise. So at age 8, I switched to Jack Daniels. I don't know that I was drinking every day, but by age 10, I was drinking every day, because I was trying to go to school, and I was very, very nervous from the abuse. So I was crying and shaking and throwing up. So the teacher sent me to the nurse. The nurse sent me to the doctor, and the doctor gave me Librium, for a benzo for anxiety, Percodan, an opiate for pain, and butalbital, a barbiturate for migraine, and I drank. So I had the 4 basic food groups: alcohol, benzo, barbiturate, and opiate. And I used them every single hour of the day for 30 years in a row, never sober, from age 10 to age 40. But I stopped crying, that was considered success. And then the summer between 5th and 6th grade, and the summer between 6th and 7th grade, we would leave New York City and go out to the suburbs for Sunday cookout, steaks on the grill. So that was the official story. So my parents and my aunt and sisters would be in the yard getting the charcoal exactly right, which is drinking in the vicinity of charcoal. And my uncle and cousin, the one who was later hanged in the jail, would take me down the basement, beat me up with wooden boards, and take turns raping me every Sunday, which made me way more nervous and upset. So at the end of the second summer, I couldn't function at all. I couldn't talk, I couldn't dress myself, I couldn't eat off a plate. I just sat and rocked and didn't communicate at all. So I couldn't go to 7th grade. So my parents sent me to the Creedmoor State Hospital out on Long Island, an adult psychiatric facility. And they were pretty primitive back then. And they have an entrance exam with 4 questions. If you flunk the exam, you get in. The questions are, who are you, like your name? Where are you, like the hospital? What's today's date? And they give you a calendar. And who's the President of the United States? And since I couldn't talk at all, I got admitted. And they gave me 3 more drugs, Thorazine, Compazine, and Stelazine, which are major tranquilizers that are addictive. But Compazine also suppresses vomiting, and I was throwing up a lot. So I think I was there maybe 2 weeks or so. And after 2 weeks on those additional drugs, plus all the others, but I didn't drink, I could answer the 4 questions. So they discharged me as cured. And I didn't understand at the time, but all the abuse stopped. Looking back, the physical abuse stopped because in New York City, 7th grade, they send you to intermediate school. Intermediate school boys take group showers in gym. So all the abuse would have shown. So it stopped because these people don't want to get caught. And they probably moved on to some other kid. But all the physical abuse stopped, so I didn't have it anymore. But I kept using. And so on the surface, we had upper middle class values. Do well in school, go to college, get a profession. So by then we'd moved to New Jersey, and I enrolled in Rutgers, the state university, because it was cheap, and it was all my dad was willing to pay for. Of course, he never paid, but nothing in our family was real. And I went off to Rutgers, and the first semester I drank and drugged so much that I flunked every class. And he didn't pay, and I didn't pay. So at the end of the first semester, I got thrown out with 2 machine-printed slips in the mailbox that both said dropped. One for all Fs, one for non-payment. And I got kicked out of the dorm on a very cold January day. And so I'm homeless, nearly broke, total assets of 69 cents, all in coins in my pocket, and nowhere to go, and I can't stop peeing my pants, and the frozen pee is sticking to my legs. And I'm thinking, what is wrong with me? Why am I homeless? Why am I always peeing myself? What is the matter? I think I drink too much. And what is the solution? Drink less. I didn't know about alcoholism. And I went to the only place in the world I thought would be nice to me, which is Walt's Tavern. And Walt was a nice guy, and in 1968 loaned me $200, which is a lot of money. And I rented a broken down house, subdivided the rooms to student apartments, bought groceries, and served meals. Now I can finance my housing and my meals. I drank less, got a job. I solved my problem. I'm a genius. I re-enrolled in Rutgers and passed courses and collect credits. I drank more and flunked out. Drank less, got in. More, flunked out. Less, get in. If you live and collect credits, you graduate. Partway through this process, I was seized with a certainty that God, who I did not believe in, wanted me to become a minister. I thought, you have such bad taste. You have no idea what you're doing. I went along with the program. And then God rigged it so I got admitted to Princeton Theological Seminary with a horrible academic record. Did the same thing, drank more, flunked out, drank less, got in, graduated. I have this big diploma from Princeton. It's all in Latin. I have a diploma I can't read from a school I can't remember. But I'm educated. Okay, ended up in Methodist ministry. And all these homeless alcoholics would come to the church looking for a handout. And I thought, I'm not helping these people. What can I do? And that county had a free detox and free treatment program. So I ended up getting all these homeless people into treatment. And I was invited to start teaching interventions at the State College Graduate School on addiction studies. I thought, I need to know more about alcoholism. I know, I'll go to open AA meetings and learn from the alcoholics. So I got to these open AA meetings and I went, wow, I feel so at home here. Too bad I'm not an alcoholic. Maybe I should drink more. I went to open AA meetings for 13 years without figuring out that I was alcoholic. See, denial is not lying. Denial is complete cluelessness. You look right at the facts and you don't get it. So then at the end of 13 years, my wife said, I want to take a sabbatical study year to study feminist liberation theology in Chicago. I thought, how inconvenient is that? I know what I'll do. I'll go to Hazleton and get a counselor license. I'm good at this. I'll go pro. So I got out to Hazleton in 1989, met all these guys who, when they were 40, I'm 40, they were okay, and at 45, their life was a smoking ruin. I thought, I'm 40. How lucky do I feel? I got out the textbook, the 7 criteria for alcoholism. Score 3 or more, you're alcoholic. I scored a perfect 7. I thought, that wasn't the word, but I'm an alcoholic. So I was taking a lot of drugs. You can't abruptly quit when you're 40. The detox is dangerous. I shook all the drugs out on the kitchen table, got a calculator and a calendar. I could detox safely in 3 weeks, but I had a lot of drugs, couldn't waste any. So I did a 6-week straight line taper, carefully detoxed myself. The last dose was 1 milligram of Valium and 7.5 milliliters of Jack Daniels, quarter of a shot. It came out to July 3rd, but I'm planning ahead for a sobriety date. I thought July 4th would be more fun. Stretched it a day. July 4th, 1989, went to an AA meeting for real. Asked this guy, Phil, to sponsor me. He said, I got 2 questions for you. I said, go. He said, do you have the desire to stop drinking? I said, yes. He said, are you willing to do what you're told? I said, yes. He gave me a big book. I had a big book. I had taught the big book. He said, this is a big book. He opened it. He said, it's in black and white. Read the black part. Okay. He turned to chapter 5. So chapter 5 is how it works. Chapter 6 is into action. The 12 steps are contained in these 2 chapters. If you reread these 2 chapters, but this time you do what they say by taking all 12 steps, you will never drink or use again. I reread them, but this time I did what they said. Never drank or used again. It's been 30.5 years. Now, it was very hard at the beginning, because as soon as the drugs were gone, I was like, I just gotta have a drink right now. They said, well, take it a day at a time. I said, I haven't got a day. They said, take a half a day at a time. So, okay, I'm not gonna drink till noon, I'll go to a noontime meeting. I'm not gonna drink till 6, I'll go to dinner with guys from AA. I'm not gonna drink till 8, I'll go to 8 o'clock meeting. I'm not gonna drink till I go to sleep, then I didn't sleep. They said, if you can't sleep, don't sleep. If you can't sleep, don't sleep. Eventually you'll sleep. Noon, 6, 8, don't sleep, sleep. Noon, 6, 8. They said, keep coming back, it gets better. I said, when? Because every day was worse than the day before. And the 35th day, I was so angry at the disease. You know what the letter F stands for? I just said, F you, F you, F you. I will not drink today. I will not take drugs today. I worked too hard for these 35 days. The next day was a little less bad, and a little less bad, and finally it broke. And it was okay. It was okay. I just did what the book said. He said, just if it says we admitted, admit. If it says we made a list, make a list. Just do the simplest version of each step. Everything you'll ever need to know about recovery is in these 164 pages. Read them, learn them, make them your own. And I found out it's actually true. I'm going to take an excursion briefly to explain what exactly is addiction. Alcoholism and drug addiction are the same thing, only the chemical is different. What is actually wrong with us, alcoholics and addicts? What's wrong with these people anyhow? I'll tell you what's wrong. It's a brain disease. It is a wiring defect. American Medical Association called alcoholism a disease in 1955, but a lot of doctors didn't believe it's a real disease. Maybe junior varsity, like a mental illness, but not a real disease. Turns out it's a real disease. What is a disease? You need 3 things for something to be a disease: an organ of the body, a defect in the organ, and symptoms result. Diabetes is a disease. The organ's a pancreas. The defect is it doesn't make insulin very well or not at all, and symptoms get result. You're sleepy, you're peeing all the time, and you can die. So alcoholism is a disease. The organ is the brain. The defect is deep in the midbrain, we're wired wrong, and symptoms result. We drink and make fools of ourselves, at best. So what is the defect? There's a wonderful video. It's on the back side of the handout, right below my book. There's a list of a video called Pleasure Unwoven. You can get the video for $27 from Amazon. It's 70 minutes long. It's very detailed science. It's all about the disease and nothing about recovery. It's a Utah doctor who drives around the canyonlands of Utah in his 4-wheel drive vehicle to illustrate the landscape of the brain. It's exactly accurate, but it's 70 minutes long, and I don't have an extra 70 minutes to show it to you. But I'll give you my 5-minute summary. In my vastly oversimplified description of the brain, there's 3 levels: top, middle, and stem. The stem's in the back. It runs breathing and heartbeat for 60 to 100 years. When it stops running, so do you. You die. That's it for the stem. Top left roughly thinks. Top right roughly has feelings. Our problem is located in the middle brain, right square in the middle where it's well protected. Midbrain does 2 things. It detects pleasure, but more importantly, it regulates survival. It sees that you don't die. It's completely automatic. It's more powerful than the top. It's faster than the top. And I call it Midbrain Override. Best example of midbrain override comes when you burn your hand. When you burn your hand, you don't stand there with your hand quietly burning while you think about your options. No. What happens is, whoop, that hand is gone off the hot surface faster than you can think, I'm burnt, and faster than you can feel pain. By the time you feel pain, the hand's already gone because the midbrain has whipped it out of there to protect you. Another example, sleep apnea. You stop breathing in your sleep, or you just face plant in the pillow. Midbrain wakes you up, rolls you over, makes you gasp for air. Again, that's great. Not breathing is very bad for survival. So the midbrain's job is to protect you from danger. And it's really good and really fast. But in alcoholism and drug addiction, it works against us. Here's how. Normal young person encounters wine, perhaps for the first time in a restaurant with his or her parents. Normal midbrain kicks out a normal dose of a neurotransmitter called dopamine, which is how we perceive pleasure. That hits the top left, and she thinks, I like wine. Hits the top right, and she feels a little warmth, a little pleasure. Then the rest of the brain responds to the presence of dopamine with another neurotransmitter called glutamate, a memory neurotransmitter, which is how we remember things. That says, make a note of this. You like wine. Perhaps when you see it again, you'll have another glass because you like it. And the transaction is complete. That is not me. I have a big wiring defect in the middle of my brain that I inherited from my ancestors. Why did I inherit it? Because every single ancestor except one grandmother is an alcoholic. So I inherited it from all of them. So alcohol hits my young 8-year-old brain, and my midbrain kicks out way too much dopamine, which hits the rest of the brain hard. It's an overdose of my naturally occurring dopamine. And I think, this is the answer to all of life's persistent mysteries. And I feel great. The rest of the brain responds with way too much glutamate, way too much learning neurotransmitter. And I overlearn the importance of alcohol. And the brain says, this is the answer to everything. Pay attention. The surplus glutamate also washes the midbrain. But the midbrain has no memory. No memory at all. It can't remember anything. This is by design, because if the midbrain could learn, you could learn to tolerate burning or suffocating, which would be very bad for survival. So the midbrain is designed with no memory at all, but it's getting a big wash of a neurotransmitter, glutamate, that says, remember this, and it can't. So it does what it can do. It shuffles the deck and relabels alcohol as number one for survival. More important than the other elements of survival: food, water, sex, which preserves the human race by making babies, and fight when threatened. So I drink alcohol instead of food, instead of water, instead of making love to my wife, and instead of taking care of business, my driver's license, my job, my personal freedom to stay out of jail. Alcohol becomes number one. So how does this show up in real life? A non-alcoholic makes an honest mistake, has too many drinks at a wedding reception, gets busted for drunk driving. They are so humiliated by being handcuffed, stuffed in a cruiser, photographed with that stupid number plate under their face, hauled in front of a judge, fine, towing charge, lawyer bill, have to attend drunk driver charm school. They will never drink and drive again. No way. Alcoholic has the exact same set of experiences, and they think, I'll be more careful next time. Because there's going to be a next time, and a time after that. There is no learning curve whatsoever. Non-alcoholic hits the third drink in an evening, and they think, ooh, I'm getting tipsy. I better stop. Alcoholic hits the third drink, and they think, yeah, go, whee, party. They think stop, we think go, with the exact same physical experience. We have different brains. And because there's no memory, there's no learning. And the non-alcoholic looks at the alcoholic and says, don't you ever learn? Answer, no, we can't. Because there's no learning in the midbrain where the alcoholism is located. The old AA saying is, once you become a pickle, you can't be a cucumber anymore. There's no learning going on. This cannot change. Change involves learning, and there isn't any in the midbrain. Whoops. So we're stuck with it. And also, because there's no learning, every night when I go to sleep, my brain resets to alcoholic. All recovery is 1 day long. So I've got a little iPhone app with the 12 steps in it, and I turned it on this morning and it says, you've been sober 11,192 days. Yes, one at a time. There's nothing I can do that makes me sober tomorrow. Every day I have to start over with sobriety, because every night when I go to sleep, my brain resets to alcoholic addict. I say alcoholic addict, just a technicality. I'm alcoholic to alcohol. I'm addicted to all the other downers, benzos, barbiturates, opiates. Now, I'm 70 years old. If you're 55 or older, it is strongly suggested you get a colonoscopy. Whee! They give you great drugs. Fentanyl, the world's strongest opiate, and Versed, which is like Valium with extra blackouts. Most people, they put the IV in your arm, next thing you know, it's time to go home. That's not me. I'm awake for the whole time, and I'm having a wonderful experience. I fall in love with the nurses. And then I'm chatty Cathy, too. I love you. 40 minutes later, they reverse it with Narcan. Wham! Party's over. He said, Mr. McDougall, we took precancerous polyps, so we want you back in 3 years instead of 5. I said, I'm free next Wednesday. And they laughed. I was serious. Addict in love. Addict in love. I can't not fall in love. It's physical. I have no choice but to fall in love with the fentanyl. Doesn't mean I have to go buy some on the street. It just is proof that I'm a drug addict. Acceptance, 417 in the big book. Acceptance is the key to all my problems today. I need to accept. This is not a spiritual awakening. It's purely biological. I cannot fail to fall in love. I just have to fall out of love when I leave the hospital. So, what are we going to do about this? How to recover? There are choices about treatment. On the back side, I put some information about treatment choices. This is Stearns County. A lot of people in Stearns County don't have money for treatment. So, the top of the page, it says Stearns County Human Services provides. Minnesota is the only state in the union with treatment on demand for people without money. It's called Rule 25. Remember, Rule 25. It says that top of the page. Stearns County Human Services provides chemical use assessments for persons seeking to know if they are drug and alcohol dependent and what treatment options are available. Public funding source. Just call it Rule 25. The Consolidated Chemical Dependency Treatment Fund. County staff determine if people are eligible. But there is a law that provides money. Okay, there may be a Rule 25 provider in this county, I don't know. The one in the Twin Cities is called New Way. They have inpatient, they have outpatient. They even have sober houses that can be paid for by Rule 25. So if you don't have money, Stearns County can provide funding for inpatient, outpatient, sober house. Free. Okay? So don't let no money stop you. You get a hold of the Stearns County Human Services. And their phone number's on the page. Okay, I looked it up, knowing that I was coming here. So don't let no money keep somebody from getting treatment here in Stearns County. Hazel and Betty Ford is very well known. Whoops, standing under a speaker. I must be standing under a speaker. Move, so I'm not under a speaker. All right, that helps. I've done this before. Hazel and Betty Ford is very famous, very comprehensive. It's also very expensive. But if you have good insurance, if you have Minnesota Blue Cross, they may cover it. So that's a good choice. You have Minnesota Blue Cross. Where I work is the Retreat in Wayzata, Minnesota. I was at Hazelden 20 years. I moved over to the Retreat in 2014. The Retreat is different. It's a 30-day residential treatment program. But it's not treatment. It's not licensed. We have no license. I think of the Treasure of the Sierra Madre, an old movie, where I say, we don't need no stinking badges. We have no license. So we have no rules. It is an AA residential big book study. We have 3 professional staff, me, the spiritual care guy, a men's coordinator, and a women's coordinator. What we have is a residential big book study. We have 3 professional staff. We have 300 AA volunteers a month who come in and teach the big book from page 1 to page 164. Big book study twice a day. AA meetings every evening. Small groups. You learn the big book the way the first 100 alcoholics learned it. Here's the book. We're going to study it one paragraph at a time, the whole 164 pages. We take people who need recovery, we put them with people who have recovery, and you learn how. We're also notable for what we do not have. Television, radio, computers, nothing with a screen. One movie Saturday night, and we limit the choice of movies. Men are with men, women are with women, except for 1 hour, one lecture a week, and I do the lecture. And they sit on opposite sides, so much for making new friends. Dining facilities are separate. It's basically all AA all the time for a month, and nothing else to do. So if you don't like AA, it'll be terribly, terribly boring. But you have the big book and other alcoholics to talk to. Here's the big deal. The total cost, if you don't get a scholarship, the total cost for a month is $5,400. Hazelden is $50,000. And I think we're better, but that's unbiased. But basically, and we also operate 6 sober houses in St. Paul. But it's all based in AA. Now, the trouble with clinical treatment, and the reason I ended up leaving clinical treatment for the retreat, is they identify all the issues you could possibly have. Well, by the time you're ready for alcohol treatment, you've accumulated so many issues, it's almost impossible to address them all. I have intimacy issues. I have adult-child issues. I have, trauma issues. And yes, you have a lot of issues, but if you try to address them all at once, you end up solving none of them, because there's too many. And my theory is, if we get sober first, then we can take the other issues one at a time. Yeah, I have really bad trauma issues. And I have had the opportunity to do individual psychotherapy for 35 years. But if I waited 35 years to be sober, you would have buried me 25 years ago. So I needed to get sober first, and then I could address my other issues. Because I'd have been dead by now. I can't be doing... Do you know any 70-year-old fentanyl addicts? There aren't any. There are no 50-year-old fentanyl addicts. I would have been dead at least 20 years ago if I was still using. So I had to get clean and sober first to give me the freedom to address other issues. So these are opportunities. On the table by the books, there's little flyers on the men's recovery program at the retreat and the women's recovery program at the retreat. But I really like the program because it's just all AA all the time. Now, why do I think that AA is better than other models? 2 reasons. One is, fancy word is epidemiology, the study of epidemics. 1785, smallpox killed everybody that caught smallpox. Everybody died. Everybody died. Dr. Edward Jenner in Scotland was the first doctor to ask, is there any group of people who don't die? And what did they do that allowed them to survive? And he found that certain milkmaids did not die, young women that milk cows. He said, so what? Nobody knew about viruses. And so he found that these young women caught a different disease called cowpox. It somewhat resembled smallpox. It made them sick, but it didn't kill them. And once they recovered from cowpox, they didn't catch smallpox. So he did a series of experiments and ended up inventing a smallpox vaccine, first vaccine in history. And then gradually smallpox receded across the face of Europe. The kings of Russia and France sent him golden keys. The kings of the kingdom said, come to our country, take anything you want for a reward, you're our hero. And he invented the whole concept of vaccination just by asking, in the face of a terrible epidemic, who doesn't die? It's epidemiology, the study of epidemics. All right, 9-county metro, Minneapolis-St. Paul, is 3.2 million people, roughly 320,000 alcoholics and addicts. The normal outcome of addiction is to die from it. So who doesn't die? And what do they do to avoid dying? There's several models being offered. There's 12 steps. There's Christianity, represented by Celebrate Recovery. There's rational emotive therapy, represented by Women for Sobriety, Secular Organization for Sobriety, and Rational Emotive Therapy. And there's nutrition, represented by Health Realization. So how many survivor groups are there meeting each week? Celebrate Recovery has 16 meetings a week of people voluntarily coming together to stay sober using Christianity. Women for Sobriety, secular organization Sobriety, together have 16 meetings a week. Health Realization, Nutrition has 6 meetings a week. Now, the St. Paul AA meeting list lists 700 meetings a week. The Minneapolis meeting list has 1,130 meetings a week. Narcotics Anonymous, which is 12-step, lists 400 meetings a week. That's 2,230 meetings a week of people staying sober with 12 steps. So the scorecard is 6, 16, 16, and 2,230. I don't go to AA because I'm religious. I go to AA because I can count. Okay? I'm practical. If I could stay sober by throwing socks at the ceiling, I'd buy a case of socks. I'd get a case for you. I'm very flexible. The other reason, the most successful group of alcoholics anywhere is commercial airline pilots who are participating in a government-mandated program. Government selects them for it because they got in trouble. It's called HIMSS, H-I-M-S, the somewhat sinister name of Human Intervention and Motivation Study. The participants are the Federal Aviation Administration, the airlines, the unions, and certain treatment centers. It's a tight noose. The union picks your AA sponsor. Another alcoholic pilot. And you will attend 3 AA meetings and a pilot's meeting every week, and your sponsor reports every Friday on your attendance and your attitude. And your attitude has been pre-selected for you. It is this: you are grateful for everything and you resent nothing. You bitch about the company, you're grounded. You bitch about the weather, you're grounded. You bitch about your sponsor, you're grounded. And most of all, you bitch about the program, you're grounded. So immediately you run off to see the union business agent to complain about this, having no choice. The business agent smiles at you and says, "Oh, this is a benefit we negotiated for you in the contract. Be grateful." And you figure out it's a tight noose. It's cooperate to graduate. You have a physical every 90 days. You have an initial psychiatric exam at 90 days and then at 1 year. The psychiatric exam is a 1-hour interview with one question. So tell me about your life. The psychiatrist listens for an hour. He doesn't care what the content is. He's listening for 2 things: the presence of gratitude and the absence of resentment. The Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous says the resentments are the #1 offender. They kill more alcoholics than anything else. Anger is the dubious luxury of normal men, but for us alcoholics it is poison. When I heard that, the presence of gratitude, the absence of resentment, I thought, bingo, that is the best description of fit spiritual condition I've ever heard. The presence of gratitude, the absence of resentment. I think of those scales of justice. You've seen them on TV shows, the scales of justice. If I put all my gratitude in one scale and all my resentment in the other, my gratitude should outweigh my resentment by at least 3 to 1, or else I'm in trouble. I need a tune-up. Everybody's got some resentment. But my gratitude needs to outweigh my resentment by at least 3 to 1 every day, or I need a tune-up. I need a tune-up. So I mentioned every night when I go to sleep, my brain resets to alcoholic. So what am I going to do? On the back, I wrote this thing I hand out to our guests called McDougall it. I got the name from one of our meth heads who had a very short attention span. I described this to him, and he says, "I know, I'm going to McDougall it." So I wrote it down on 1 page. What do I actually do every morning? Because every night my brain has reset, and I'm fully committed to my drugs when I wake up. So I need to be fully committed to sobriety. So this is what I actually do. Step 1 of Alcoholics Anonymous says, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Step 2 says we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And step 3 says we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. So that's the first 3 steps. And I take the first 3 steps of AA in the first 1 minute of my day. And I am not a morning person. I'm 70, I'm tired, and I'm naturally cranky. So I wake up, bleh. Step 1. Good morning, John. You're an alcoholic. Pay attention. Huh? What? Oh, it didn't go away. Step 2. There's a God. It's not me. Okay, God, me. Which one is what? We'll get it right. Okay. Step 3. I need a fresh decision today to turn my will and my life over. Why? Because yesterday's decision vanished in my sleep. 1, 2, 3, go. That took 1 minute. But how? How am I going to turn my will and my life over to the care of God? I think of my life unfolding as a series of scenes. 5 minutes in the bathroom, 10 minutes to get dressed, 5 minutes stop at Starbucks at Great in Oxford, 30-minute drive over to the retreat, and then appointments during the day. And this afternoon I drove up here. But blocks of time. In each block of time, just like a movie or TV show, camera sees scene 1, scene 2, scene 3. In each block of time, I address the same third-step question, which is this: what does God want me to do about what's right in front of me right now? Answer the question, do that. It's never going to be get drunk. It's never going to be a jerk. It's never going to be indulge your character defects in all their glory. It's going to be do the right thing, John. Right thing right now. Right thing right now. Right thing right now. One scene at a time. Well, how do I know the right thing? If I'm not drunk, I've got a conscience and it works. I may not want to know. I may not want to know that I know, but I can know. So can you. And if I still have doubt about the right thing, I take what I think is right and I shop it around with my Monday night dinner group after the AA meeting. The same dozen guys I've been having dinner with for 15 years in a row. If they laugh at me, it was just my ego. If they ratify it, it's highly likely to be right. That's how I navigate. Right thing right now. Appendix 2 in AA Big Book, Spiritual Awakening, uses the phrase God consciousness, G-O-D-consciousness. I think that means living with a gentle awareness. I am always in the presence of God. So what's God want me to do? Right on the spot. Right here, right now, do that. And the book describes God consciousness as a profound alteration in our reaction to life, an unsuspected inner resource, and a personality change sufficient to produce recovery. People say, John, what was your spiritual awakening? I say, simple. I'm not an asshole anymore. It went away, and it went away the way a headache goes away. When a headache goes away, you don't notice it leaving. You just notice, oh, it's gone. I wonder what happened. All my bad character traits, restless, irritable, discontent, rude, cruel, gratuitously cruel, faded away. I didn't even notice them leaving. But by doing the right thing now and then and then and then. 1972, I had to start a marriage to Kathy. I thought, I'm an alcoholic, I'm immature. I thought marriage was a license. It entitles me to food and sex. I'm selfish. I came over every night at 6 o'clock. Hi, I'm home. What's for dinner? Want to have sex? Something about that lacked charm. After 2 years, she divorced me. I thought I was Mr. Fabulous. How could she make a mistake like that? She found a way. Okay. Now, step 11 of AA has a remarkable insight about prayer. Step 11 says we sought through prayer and meditation to have conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of God's will for our life. Now, I'm a Methodist minister. I was a parish pastor 17 years. Most prayer, including most church prayers, are more magical than faithful. Here's the difference. In magic, you try to say the magic words to get God to do what you want. In faith, we try to line ourselves up to do what God wants. So we get to the pastoral prayer in church. Pastor says, what are the concerns of the people? Somebody raised their hand. Pastor, Mrs. Smith has cancer. Oh my goodness, isn't that awful? Let's all pray for Mrs. Smith. But what are we doing? We're asking God to do something good for Mrs. Smith. What if we did that? We're giving God directions, but we are not God's supervisor. What if we did it the AA way? We get to the pastoral prayer. Pastor, Mrs. Smith has cancer. Oh my goodness, that's awful. Let's pray that God would show us what we should do for Mrs. Smith. Maybe she's too sick to cook dinner. We could cook for her. Maybe she needs a ride to the hospital. Maybe she can't afford the terribly expensive cancer medicines that might save her life. We should do a fundraiser and buy her those medicines that could save her life. What can we do for Mrs. Smith? God, show us. Pray for knowledge of God's will for our lives. Go back to the story of Kathy. After she divorced me, she never remarried. She had a career as an attorney. But then she developed bilateral breast cancer, and it spread to her liver and the base of her spine. It was not likely to be survivable. She lost her job. She lost her home. They're living in a camping trailer in New Jersey, and it's October. The winter's coming. It's not viable. And she sent a group email to 50 people. She left me on her email list. She had redefined me as an old friend from college. Whatever. And I got this group email, and I looked at it, and my first thought was, oh, that's awful. I'll say a prayer for her. And I thought, big deal. It takes 10 seconds to say a prayer, blow her off, and make her God's problem. But I'm not God's supervisor. Step 11, John, pray for knowledge of God's will for my life. What's God want me to do? First thought was, well, maybe you should visit her. The Bible says visit the sick. She lives in New Jersey, so I called her, see if she wanted to visit. Well, she did. And I arranged a visit, but I kept talking to her. She was an unreasonable optimist. She thought she's going to get well. Finally, the doctor said, look, you're not going to get well. Apply for Social Security disability. But when you apply for disability, there's about a 6-month gap between application and check. Talked to my wife, Priscilla. I said, I want to offer Kathy a check for the 6 months worth of Social Security disability that the government does not give her. Maybe she can get out of that stupid trailer and into assisted living before the snow flies. She said, fine. We sent her that check. And I visited. We were still not that compatible, if you can imagine a 12-hour visit where I didn't get a word in edgewise, but nonetheless. And we supplied additional financial support over the Social Security check for the next 18 months until she died of the cancer she had. But I think it was a better response when I asked, okay, John, what does God want from you? Because the truth is, I did love her once, and I did make a commitment to her once, even if she dumped me for adequate reason. But I could help, and I did help, but it's always the right question. What does God want from me right now? So that was a big thing, but it doesn't matter. It can be a little thing. 3 years ago, my wife says, July 4th, would you go to the supermarket and pick up the sheet cake for the cookout? Right answer? Yes. Wrong answer? Do it yourself. So I said yes. Go to the supermarket bakery, pick up the sheet cake. Next right answer, pay for it. Wrong answer, steal it. So I get online to pay for it. Simple. Get to the head of the line. The cashier's an old lady. I put the cake on the rubber belt. The cake says, happy 27-year sobriety, John. Cashier looks at the cake. She says, congratulations on your sobriety. I said, thank you. She says, yeah, my son died in April of an overdose. He was 50. I said, oh, that's harsh. She says, yeah, it broke my husband's heart. He died a month later. I said, oh, that's sad. She said, yeah, we spent all our money on treatments that didn't work. He died anyhow. We even cashed in both our retirement accounts and spent all that money. It didn't matter. Now I'm 70 years old, working in a supermarket to supplement my Social Security. Thinking, okay, John, right thing right now. You're in line. You got like 1 minute. What's God want from you? I said, well, I can think of one consolation in all that. You don't have to wonder what would have happened if you did one thing more for your son. Because you did everything you could. You even cashed in both retirement accounts and spent all that money. So you're not left wondering, what if I did one thing more for him? Maybe he would have made it. Because you did every single thing you possibly could. She looked at me and said, thank you for that. I said, you're welcome, paid for the cake and left. Right thing right now. I didn't say have a nice day. She doesn't have nice days. But I could think of one positive thing. Said it, paid, left. Right thing right now. We're always in God's presence. What's he want? I do a lot of speaking. I went 2 months ago, spoke to an AA group in San Diego. And I have 1.5 million miles in Delta Airlines. I'm a million miler, platinum status, so I almost always am in first class. I had seat 2B on the aisle in first class. I misread the schedule. I thought it boarded at 8:35. It boarded at 8:25, so first class had filled up. And I realized several things at the same moment, kind of assembling the data in my head. First thing, somebody's in my seat. Second thing, the only open seat is 1C, bulkhead with limited footroom. Third thing, the only open overhead space is over 3B. And the fourth thing, the flight attendant standing in the aisle. I said, somebody's in my seat. Fifth thing, the guy in my seat has supplemental oxygen, so the tank has to go under the seat in front of him. There is no space in 1C. He can't do that there. And the flight attendant says, Mr. McDougall, would you mind taking the bulkhead seat? So I'm assembling all this in my head. I went, yeah, sure, right thing right now. He can't sit there, no room for the oxygen. Problem, solution, right thing right now. She calls to the lead attendant, I solved the problem. The lead said, well, I'm glad you did. The gate agent should have sorted it out instead of dumping it in our lap. I thought, well, problem, solution, right thing right now. took a couple things out of my bag because it can't go in one seat, shoved it over 3C, sat down with a couple things that I could use in the flight. Fine, problem, solution. We took off. She comes back with a handheld computer. She says, "So, Mr. McDougall, if you give me your boarding pass, I'll scan it. We'll give you 2,500 extra frequent flyer miles for being nice." I thought, "Oh, okay." There's 20 seats in first. You subtract me and that guy, that's 18 other seats. And she says in a rather loud voice, "I'm so glad you said yes. I asked 18 people to swap. They all told me no. If you hadn't said yes, I would have had to deplane them." I thought, wow, that reflects rather poorly on us as a group. But I thought, if I was still drinking, I would have said no. I not only would have said no, I would have been angry for 4 hours that somebody would ask the great I am to give something up. It would have ruined my day. That somebody would ask me to give up something. To me, it's so simple. Problem, solution. He can't sit there, I'll sit there. She got 18 no's and an answer. I wonder if they're all alcoholics who need treatment. Right thing right now. Right thing right now. It's so simple. It's so simple. And it works. It's been working for 30 years now. Right thing right now. I go back to that FAA measure. Gratitude versus resentment. Years ago, I drove a cab in New York City. Back when you could make a living doing it. You got half the meter plus tips. Now you have to lease the cab. So if you lease the cab on a sunny day, you could actually lose money if everybody wants to walk. But then you got half the meter plus tips. It was a good job back then. And the meters were mechanical, not electronic. They had 2 cables running through them. One cable ran driven by distance, and the other cable ran driven by time. So the cable by distance measured miles, and the other cable measured waiting time. So if you're stuck in traffic, the time cable might run faster. So there were 2 different cables running the meter. Whichever cable moved faster drove the meter. What's that have to do with anything? What it has to do is, I think in pictures and in memories, because I'm old. When you get older, your memories are more important. I have the memory of the taxi meter with 2 cables driving it. And I imagine in my mind, I got a gratitude cable that's moving, and I got a resentment cable that's moving. And whichever one is moving faster is going to run my life. So I got to be careful which one's moving faster. Because everybody's got some gratitude and everybody's got some resentment. I don't think we get to be saints till after we die, and I'm not planning to die just now. My wife's expecting me home. So, how much gratitude do I have? How much resentment? It's terribly, terribly important. Gratitude is a choice. It's a choice. It's not just a spiritual blessing, it's a choice. And every situation, I can have gratitude or resentment. And the neighborhood I grew up in Queens was Irish and Jewish. And Jews argue with God a lot. They have this contentious relationship. Israel is the only Middle Eastern country with no oil. Figure that out. They have this argument. And so, what a deal. And so my relationship with God is partly from my Jewish neighbors. We argue. And God argues with me, which is even worse. And so I really love Priscilla. We've been married 44 years now. She put up with me for 13 years of drinking. It was helped that her first husband was so brutal. I followed a turkey. I look good by comparison. But I really love her. But I was doing something God didn't like. And what it was, I don't do lonely well. And I was afraid. She's 10 and a half years older. I'm 70, she's 81. And if you're over 80, death can be a random event. You don't even have to be sick. You can just expire. And I don't like loneliness. And so I had this fear that she'd die first and I'd be bereft. And so to defend against that, I was holding back 10% on my emotions, keeping 10% of my emotions in reserve, so if she died first, I wouldn't be totally screwed. And God knew this. And so this little voice in my head from God, the little God voice was saying, if not now, when? Shut up. If not now, when? What? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Why are you bothering me? If not now, what? If not now, when? What? And God knew I was holding back. Well, she should be happy with 90%, you know. I'm good to her. She's got no complaints. If not now, when? And I was protecting myself from sudden loss. But there's an unavoidable ratio between risk and reward. Whether you're betting on the horses or having a marriage. And I thought, but if I go all in and then she dies, I'm really screwed. And the little boy said, yeah, you will be. I thought, oh, no. And I went all in. And the fear got worse. But the relationship got better. Oh. You know? When I was 20, my ideal woman was a combination of cheerleader, cocktail nurse, and nurse. I didn't find her. But it was selfish. Page 14 in the big book, Bill Wilson listening to his friend Ebby Thatcher talking about spiritual awakening. And Bill Wilson's still drinking, and he says, oh, simple, but not easy. A price must be paid. It meant the destruction of self-centeredness. That was what was wrong with me and Kathy. I was totally self-centered. Well, I had the destruction of the marriage. Self-centeredness stayed, marriage ended. Oh, I didn't catch that clue. It meant the destruction of self-centeredness. Destruction of self-centeredness. Page 63 in AA's big book. It says selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our problems. Not alcohol, selfishness. Shut up, give me another drink. I don't care how much damage to my family, I want that drug. It's selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think, says AA, is the root of our problem. Not even alcohol, it's selfishness. So, we must be rid of it or it kills us, says the big book. So the answer is unselfishness. So, I went all in and the relationship got better. So she's 81, I'm 70. And I have trouble sleeping, still have some nightmares from the childhood trauma. And not long ago, I nudged her and said, you're snoring because you roll over. And she rolled over. And she's snoring. I nudged her, could you roll over? She rolled back. And she wasn't exactly snoring, but she's making some noise. And I said to God, what am I going to do? I nudged her twice, she rolled over twice. It's not really snoring, but I can't sleep. I can't sleep. I said, what am I going to do? I can't sleep. What am I going to do? And God said, you know, John, there may come a time when you would give anything just to hear her behind you one more time. And I went right to sleep. See, gratitude, love, talking to God. These are gifts of this program. This program has nothing, really almost nothing to do with not drinking. That's the Just Say No to Drugs, the milk carton program. So I did this little book called Being Sober and Becoming Happy. I'm going to finish up here because it's an hour later. But the theory of the book, and the theory really of AA, is first you take the 12 steps to get bad things to stop. Jail, hospital, puking your guts out, fighting, saying, why did I do this? Get all the bad things to stop. But if you keep taking the 12 steps in sobriety and applying them in sobriety, you end up happy. I'll give one more example. Page 42 in the big book, we meet a guy named Fred who was a businessman. He said, my old way of life was by no means a bad one, but I would not exchange its best moments for the worst I have now. And spiritual principles would solve all my problems. I think, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Bad, good. But it's true. 3 years ago, my wife's an Al-Anon. She has the same 12 steps. 3 years ago, she was 77, I was 67. We're expecting our children to come for Christmas. It's 3 days before Christmas. She turns to me at dinner and says, you know, I'm having some dizzy spells. I think I'm old. Now, if I was drinking, I would have said, you are old. Here, have a glass of wine. Drink up, be happy, don't worry, be happy. That's my answer to everything. Have a glass of wine, relax. But I'm an AA. What spiritual principles? Honesty, open-minded willingness. How? Problem, inventory, solution. So I said, well, you were old last week and you didn't have dizzy spells. So our program teaches honesty, openness, willingness, problem, inventory, solution. So why don't you go to the doctor in the morning? Old is not a diagnosis. So she goes to the doctor in the morning. Doctor says, I don't see anything wrong. But let's take a more detailed inventory. I want you to wear a Holter heart monitor for a month. Whenever you have a dizzy spell, press the button that will timestamp the dizzy spell. It will perhaps give us a clue, an artifact as to what's wrong. Old is not a diagnosis. So she comes home at 1 o'clock with a heart monitor. 4:30, she presses a button. Doesn't think much of it. We go to bed that night. Middle of the night, the phone rings. It's a monitoring company. Are you all right? Goes, yeah, I'm fine. I was sleeping. So, well, your heart stopped for 6 seconds. We had to ask. No, I'm all right. We go back to sleep. 6 o'clock in the morning, Regions Hospital, St. Paul calls. Come in. They didn't say, would you like an appointment? So we got dressed and went in. Doctor says, well, your heart stopped 4.5 seconds yesterday when you pressed the button. It stopped 6 seconds during the night, so we want to give you an on-demand pacemaker. You know, whenever your heart skips a beat, the pacemaker will supply one. This will solve the problem. So scrub up, go down the hall to the cath lab, we'll do it now. So she goes down the hall. Hour and a half later, doctor comes back, says, well, we're all done. We implanted a Medtronic 4-lead MRI-compliant pacemaker. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. This solves the problem. She's resting quietly with anesthetic. You can go see her. So I go down the hall. They got her cardiogram up on a big color TV. Well, I was on ambulances 16 years. I can read them somewhat well, and it's absolutely pitch perfect. Exactly 60 beats a minute where they set it for a resting heartbeat. Perfect QRST wave. People aren't that perfect. I said to the tech, it's an on-demand pacemaker. How many beats a minute is the pacemaker doing? Tech said, all of them. Her heart had stopped entirely. So if I said, have a glass of wine, don't worry, be happy, she'd have died. So, in by 7, out by 2, 4 o'clock, she's standing in the kitchen doing a rib roast with our daughters who come to town. It's 4 years later, she's fine. And there's a little box under the bed that talks to the pacemaker from time to time to check that it's happy. She's 81, she's fine. Spiritual principles, honest, open-minded, willing, problem, inventory, solution, would solve all our problems, just like Fred said. So it's a great program. With that, I'll stop talking at you and take questions. So, questions? Yes.
Hi, this is Elizabeth speaking. How has your recovery and sobriety affected your children? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I mean, we get along great. I get along with 2 daughters, 2 sons-in-law, and 3 grandchildren. We all get along very well. It's a little hard to distinguish because their biological dad died when they were 2 and 4. And during those years, he beat the crap out of their mom. I suspect he may have beaten them, but they say they don't. The younger girl says she doesn't remember at all, and the older girl won't talk about him. So they do show some signs of trauma from their original experience. Interesting thing is, I got them when they were 8 and 10. And they were offered the chance to be adopted, and they did take my last name and all. They got the option of what they want to call me, and they chose John rather than any variation on father. I think their dad ruined the concept of father. Their bio dad ruined the concept of father. I'm fine with being John. The interesting thing is, at one point, my mother-in-law referred, and my older daughter is really polite. My younger daughter had the temperament of a bag of wet cats. And my older daughter, the polite one, my mother-in-law referred to my polite older daughter one time as her stepfather. And she about ripped her lungs off and said, he's my father! I said, whoa, I mean, I never heard her sound like that. So it was like, don't touch the issue. So, but it's a touchy father. The original dad ran the concept into the ground. So I'm kind of careful around it. But we get along well. I've gone on very nice vacations with my older daughter and her husband. He's a physician and a world-famous cardiologist, heart transplant cardiologist. And so they have money, so they've gone on vacation with us. And his colleagues go, you're going on vacation with your in-laws and they're not paying? He says, yeah, we get along great. So. Other question? Yes.
John, I saw you speak after my first time in 2013. I've seen you a few times, so thanks for coming up in that first.
Welcome.
Does that apply to the treatment facility that you mentioned earlier, at a retreat?
No, Rule 25, question is, does Rule 25 apply to the retreat? No, because the retreat is not licensed. Rule 25 funding does not apply. I put New Way down because New Way in Minneapolis and St. Paul is almost all Rule 25 funding. There may be a facility closer that takes Rule 25, but your Stearns County assessor would know where they like to send people. Minnesota is the only state in the union that has publicly funded treatment for people that don't have money. Yes?
I was just going to say, I was fortunate enough to be at retreat twice, and each time you were there for me. And I just want to tell you how much it meant for me, what you did for me. I'm sitting here today listening to you, and I'm going, wow. What I'm trying to say is not so much about me, but about you. And I'm wondering, you are so gifted. You have, I'm just excited to be in your presence.
Thank you. And it wasn't so much a question as a comment that has been very helpful to you when you've been at the retreat. And I'm glad to be able to be helpful. Thank you. Other folks? Yes, in the back.
I teach here at college, so we get a lot of the college-age students that might be experimenting with alcohol for the first time. What would you say to students that are starting to experiment with alcohol?
Be careful. I gave a talk at a southern state university, and it was mandatory attendance because their fraternities had gotten in trouble, so they were forced to listen to me. So it was a very unwilling audience. And so I decided, since I could not enlist them, I would make them angry. And I said, I'm going to start with stuff you don't know. And of course, they say, we know everything. And I said, what happens to a 21-year-old who decides who's never had alcohol before, who decides to drink 21 shots on his 21st birthday? He will absolutely die. And a medically standard 75-kilogram male in good health, medically standard 75-kilogram male in good health who drinks 21 shots in one evening on his 21st birthday. And what's his chance of being okay? And they all had various estimates. It said 0. He will absolutely die. And that's not an uncommon thing. I said, it'll be fatal. Okay. I said, second, what's a dram? What's a dram? Nobody knew what a dram was. I said, it's 1/16 of an ounce. Now, what's a dram shop law? Nobody knew what a dram shop law was. I said, okay, if your fraternity serves 1/16 of an ounce of liquor to a human being, and that human being has a fatal accident on the way home, your fraternity is liable for all the damage that person did. That's the law of this state. I said, how lucky do you feel? I said, now that I have your attention, I want to talk about alcoholism and problem drinking, which are different things. You don't have to be an alcoholic to have problem drinking. And so we had an interesting evening. I figured if I couldn't get him interested, I'd make him mad. That'll get him interested. Other questions? Yes?
Thanks for it. I'm very also grateful that you're here. I really enjoyed listening to you and the simplicity that you have. So I hope this question isn't too big for a bag of badgers, but you pretty vehemently said, I just did what the book says.
Yep.
How do you handle rebuttals of it's just a God program?
It is a God program.
Okay, maybe I'll ask it this way. When someone holds the God of their misunderstanding up to even reading the book,
Well, do they have another plan? And will that plan work for them? I'm not opposed to somebody getting sober some other way. Go for it. Anything that works is great. Got another plan? Go for it. Have a nice day.
So have you, in your time working at your facility or in your sponsorship, ever tried to get people to see past the God program to be in a spiritual program?
Oh yeah, A is a spiritual program, and you know, you don't have to believe in God. I mean, there's a lot of people finesse it. They say, look, where it says God, say G-O-D, group of drunks, or good orderly direction. I talk about how when Bill Wilson was giving out big books, he was a salesman and a promoter, and he sent them all over the place, and he sent one to a group of Thai Buddhist monks, and they meditated a long time, and they wrote back and say, well, you know, Buddhism doesn't have a God. The Buddha is an enlightened man, not a God. So where your book says God, we would say the good, but otherwise we like your book. So if you're like totally allergic to the word God, try substituting the word good. Step 3, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over the care of the good. Fine, do that. You don't like God? Try the good. Substitute the word good every time the word God appears in a big book. See if that works for you. Try that. No, that's fine. You can have recovery using the word good. And I'm very fond of Thailand. I'm about to take my 10th trip, March 18th, and I have some Thai videos. You might want to, you ever seen the Thai videos, advertising? Okay, Thailand is Thai Buddhism is very concerned with living out what they call the good. And you might want to write down on YouTube, Thai, T-H-A-I, life, unsung hero. And another video, they're 3 minutes each. The first one's Thai, life, unsung hero. And another video is 4 words, true, T-R-U-E, move, M-O-V-E, the letter H, and giving. Each one of them is a 3-minute commercial that tells a story about the Thai concept of the good, and then a company name is tacked on the end, unrelated to the video. Many of their television commercials are like ours. Labor Day weekend, 20% off, buy now. But a good number of their commercials tell a little story for 3 minutes about the good. And then a company name is tacked on the end, completely unrelated to the commercial, to reinforce this social value of the good. I think you'll find those 2 YouTube videos touching, emotionally moving, because they're promoting this cultural value of the good. And people find them moving. I say, this is what the good looks like. Try that. Try a spiritual life based on the good. It beats the hell out of the bad or the truly vicious.
What was the second?
Okay. True, T-R-U-E, move, M-O-V-E, H, giving, G-I-V-I-N-G, on YouTube. And they're really sweet videos. And they don't say God. They're about the good. In Thailand, visible displays of anger are not done. If you yell and get red-faced, people look at you like, oh God, it sucks to be you. But you don't get any results. They just look at you like, oh, how awful. Yes?
What is the distinction between problem drinking and alcoholism? And what would you recommend to the problem?
What I have is problem drinking, what you have is alcoholism. No. The question was, what's the difference between problem drinking and alcoholism? Oh, there's a bunch of standardized screening tests. The shortest is a Michigan alcohol screening test. It's the word CAGE, C-A-G-E, control, anger, guilt, eye-opener. You keep trying to control your drinking. You're angry when you're challenged about the drinking. You have guilt about the drinking, and you need an eye-opener first thing in the morning. That's the short and dirty screening test. There's DSM-5 criteria with 11 criteria, and if you score 3, you have They call it substance abuse disorder. You have mild substance abuse disorder. 5, you have moderate substance abuse disorder. 7, you have severe substance abuse disorder. The old one, so anyone, an alcoholic is someone who drinks more than his doctor does. Basically, my rule of thumb is if it causes a problem, it is a problem. If you eat cauliflower and the police pull you over, you have a cauliflower problem.
Yeah, so problem drinking causes a problem, so.
I've never seen a problem drinker who wasn't an alcoholic. Problem drinker is an alcoholic who isn't ready to change. I mean, do you ever see somebody who had a cauliflower problem? They stash them in their desk at work and get people out of the office so they can have some more cauliflower. I mean, it just doesn't happen. I'd love to talk to you, honey, but I got to can you leave? So, you know, it doesn't happen. Yes.
I just wanted to second your opinion on that
Pleasure unwoven.
My husband, as he said, he's in lifelong recovery, and I never believed alcoholism was a disease until
Right.
I watched that DVD, and we share it with
Yeah.
people we know that have people in their family that
Yep.
don't believe it's a disease, because it really does tell you what happens to
Yep.
your brain.
The film Pleasure Unwoven. The lady likes the movie Pleasure Unwoven. It helped her understand. It's the facts. What am I saying? Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. They're not entitled to their own facts. Yeah. Any other? Okay, besides, you don't have to sit through all the questions if you don't want to either. You're not trapped. Any other questions? Well, I thank you for being a very fun audience.